The alarm clock buzzed before sunrise, a sharp reminder of another long day. Alina Jackson rubbed her tired eyes, her body aching from yesterday's double shift. At 38, she felt older than her years. The mirror above her dresser showed a strong, dark-skinned woman with lines of exhaustion around her eyes, but also a quiet determination that never seemed to fade. She moved through the small, worn-down house in silence. The kitchen smelled faintly of last night's leftovers, and the counters were stacked with unpaid bills tucked under a chipped mug. Every envelope whispered the same truth. The money wasn't enough, no matter how many hours she worked. But Alina had no time to dwell. 2 children relied on her. She knocked gently on Marcus's door. "Up, soldier," she whispered with a faint smile. Her son, 14, tall for his age, groaned from under the blankets. His hair stuck out in messy curls, and his school clothes hung from the chair, ironed neatly by Alina the night before. Across the hall, 9-year-old Ava was already awake, humming softly as she arranged her dolls on the bed. She was the dreamer of the family, full of questions and bright ideas, though lately Alina noticed fear creeping into her daughter's eyes more often than before. By 6 a.m., the Jackson family sat at their small kitchen table, eating oatmeal and toast. Their mornings followed a rhythm structured, disciplined. Alina had carried the habits from her Marine years into motherhood: wake early, stay organized, prepare for the day like a mission. To neighbors, it seemed unusual. To Alina, it was survival. Still, no matter how strong she tried to be, she couldn't shield her children from the feeling of being outsiders. Their neighborhood was a quiet stretch of suburban streets, with manicured lawns and 2-story houses that looked alike. Families here gathered at cookouts and waved politely at each other, but the Jacksons always stood apart. There was no father at their table, no laughter spilling from their backyard, just Alina, her kids, and the shadows of sacrifice. At school, Marcus kept to himself. Other boys his age talked about video games, sports, and family vacations. Marcus walked home quietly, his backpack heavy not only with books but with the weight of not fitting in. His classmates whispered that he was strange, too serious, too disciplined. They noticed he didn't joke much, didn't stay out late, and always seemed tired. Ava faced her own challenges. At 9, she wanted to belong, to be invited to birthday parties and sleepovers. Instead, her classmates teased her for the way she lined up her pencils perfectly, or for the quiet way she folded her napkin. At lunch, small signs of the discipline her mother had instilled. They called her weird, sometimes worse. Alina knew it. She could see it in the slump of Marcus's shoulders, and in Ava's downcast eyes when she climbed into the car after school. She wanted to tell them they weren't different, they were strong. But strength wasn't the same as belonging, and children rarely cared about quiet resilience. At night, when the children slept, Alina often sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the framed photo of her late husband. He had died serving overseas, leaving her with 2 young kids and a mountain of grief. She never let them see her cry. Instead, she wore her Marine discipline like armor, trying to be both mother and father, protector and provider. Still, the cracks showed. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, Alina's mind drifted back to the desert heat of her deployments, to the sound of helicopters and the weight of her rifle. She was once a decorated Marine, praised for her leadership and bravery, but now, she was just the single mom who worked late shifts at the diner and cleaned houses on weekends to keep food on the table. She never told the neighbors about her medals, never spoke about combat, that life was behind her, buried deep. Or at least, that's what she wanted to believe, because as much as she longed for peace, she could feel the tension in her bones. The world wasn't kind, and her children were beginning to taste that cruelty. One evening, after a long shift, Alina came home to find Marcus sitting silently on the porch steps, his jaw tight, fists clenched. Ava sat beside him, her head resting on her brother's shoulder. Alina's heart sank. "What happened?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Neither child answered right away. Marcus stared at the ground, his silence louder than words. Ava's eyes brimmed with tears, but she shook her head, unwilling to speak. Alina crouched down in front of them, placing a hand on each of their knees. She looked into their faces, the same brown eyes that reminded her so much of their father, and felt the storm building inside her. She didn't push them. She knew that when the time was right, they would tell her. But deep down, she sensed what was happening. The world outside their home was starting to show its teeth, and her children were becoming targets. Alina rose, her back straight, her expression unreadable. Inside, her heart ached with fear and frustration. She had fought battles halfway across the world, but nothing compared to the quiet war of protecting her children from the cruelty of others. As she locked the front door that night, Alina made a silent promise to herself. Whatever storm was coming, she would face it. She would not allow the world to break her family. And though she still wore the mask of a tired single mom, something deeper stirred within her, the warrior who had never truly left. The first signs of trouble came quietly, like whispers in the wind. Marcus returned home one afternoon with his backpack ripped along the side. He brushed it off as an accident, but Alina noticed the shame in his eyes. Ava mentioned that some kids at school laughed when Marcus walked by, calling him Robot Boy because of the way he stood so straight and serious. It didn't take long for Alina to learn the name that would soon become a storm in her family's life. Jason Miller. Jason was 15, tall, and smug beyond his years. His blonde hair was always styled perfectly, his sneakers brand new, and his confidence fueled by privilege. He wasn't just a bully, he was the kind of boy who knew his mother would defend him no matter what he did. And Jason had a following. 2 other boys, Cole and Ryan, shadowed him like guards, laughing at every cruel joke and backing him up when things turned ugly. The first act of cruelty was small. Jason mocked Marcus in the cafeteria, imitating his stiff walk and calling him Soldier Boy. The room erupted in laughter, and though Marcus kept his head down, the humiliation stung like a slap. Soon after, Ava's backpack was vandalized. Someone had scrawled "weirdo" across the front with black marker. Ava tried to scrub it off, but the stain remained. That night she curled into Elena's arms, whispering that she didn't want to go back to school. Elena listened in silence, her chest burning. She wanted to march into that school and demand justice, but she also knew bullies thrived on attention. For now, she comforted her children with soft words and warm hugs, though deep inside, she was beginning to feel the stirrings of something darker. The rumors spread next. Jason told classmates that Marcus's dad had run away because he couldn't stand them. A cruel twist of the truth. Marcus clenched his fists when he heard it, but he didn't fight back. He knew what his mother had taught him: control your temper, never give them what they want. Still, the words cut deep, reopening wounds he rarely spoke about. At home, Alina noticed changes in both children. Marcus spent more time in his room, headphones on, shutting out the world. Ava, usually bright and curious, grew quieter. She cried at night when she thought no one was listening. Alina heard it through the thin walls, and each muffled sob felt like a knife to her heart. One evening, Alina tried to reach her son. She found him sitting on his bed, staring at his homework but not really reading it. "You okay, baby?" she asked gently. "I'm fine," he muttered without looking up. But Alina knew better. His voice was tight, his jaw clenched. He wasn't fine. None of them were. The tension grew heavier with every passing week. The bullies became bolder, testing boundaries. One morning, Marcus's bike tires were slashed, the rubber shredded beyond repair. Later, a rock smashed through the small window by their front porch. On the driveway, someone had scrawled with chalk, "Go back where you came from." Elena's hands shook as she scrubbed the words away. Neighbors watched from behind their curtains but said nothing. She felt the sting of isolation, not just for her children but for herself. That night, Alina sat at the kitchen table long after the kids had gone to bed. The bills lay scattered before her, but she couldn't focus. Her mind raced with worry and anger. She had fought men twice her size, survived battles that most couldn't imagine. Yet here, in this quiet suburban neighborhood, her children were being crushed by cruelty. She couldn't shoot, punch, or outrun. Across town, Jason lounged in his living room, bragging to his friends. His mother, Karen Miller, sipped wine on the couch, half listening. When another parent called to complain about Jason's behavior, Karen waved it off. "They're just kids," she said dismissively, her tone dripping with superiority. Boys will be boys, but Jason wasn't just being a boy. He was learning how to destroy with words, how to feed on fear, and how to get away with it. And with every cruel act, Marcus and Ava sank deeper into despair. Alina noticed Ava clinging closer whenever they walked outside, her small hand gripping her mother's tightly. Marcus, on the other hand, grew distant. One night, Alina overheard him punching his pillow, whispering, "Why me? Why us?" Her heart broke in silence. The air in the Jackson home grew heavy with unspoken words, with questions neither child dared to ask. Why don't they leave us alone? Why are we the ones who don't belong? And while Alina tried to shield them, she couldn't ignore the truth. The bullying was no longer just a series of cruel jokes, it was escalating. becoming dangerous, the smashed window, the slashed tires. The hateful messages were only the beginning. Something darker was brewing. And though Alina couldn't see it yet, she could feel it pressing against the edges of their lives like a storm on the horizon. Thought she closed her eyes that night and whispered a prayer. But deep inside, she knew prayers alone wouldn't be enough. The breaking point came on a gray Thursday afternoon. The sky hung low and heavy, as if it already knew what was about to happen. Marcus usually walked home from school, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his eyes fixed on the cracked sidewalk. That day, Jason and his friends were waiting. They cornered him behind the gym, a place where the teachers never looked and the cameras didn't reach. "Look who it is," Jason sneered, his phone already in his hand, recording. "Soldier Boy, all alone." Marcus tried to push past them, but Cole shoved him back. Ryan laughed, circling like a predator. Jason didn't waste time. He tripped Marcus, and when he stumbled, the others pushed him down. The concrete scraped his palms, blood pooling in tiny lines. Laughter echoed around him. Jason held the phone close to Marcus's face, mocking every tear he tried to hide. "Cry for us, Soldier Boy. Where's your army now?" Marcus clenched his fists, wanting to fight, but 3 against 1 was impossible. A kick to his ribs sent him gasping for air. Another shove left his cheek bruised. Every second of it was captured on Jason's phone. When they were done, they walked away laughing, leaving Marcus on the ground. Jason uploaded the video before Marcus even stood up. By the time Marcus limped home, half the school had already seen it. That evening, Alina opened the door to find her son battered and silent. His lip was split, his shirt torn. Ava froze when she saw him, her doll slipping from her hands. "Marcus," Alina rushed forward, pulling him into her arms. He stiffened, ashamed, but she held him tightly anyway. "Who did this?" she asked, her voice steady, though her heart thundered in her chest. Marcus didn't answer. He just shook his head, his eyes full of humiliation. Alina cleaned his wounds in silence, her hands gentle but firm. Inside, her rage grew like fire. She wanted names, wanted faces, wanted justice. But Marcus wouldn't speak. He stared at the floor, whispering only once, Don't make it worse." The next morning, Alina stormed into the school office. The principal sat stiffly behind his desk, his tie too tight, his smile practiced. "My son was attacked yesterday," Alina said firmly, "on school grounds, and someone recorded it. What are you going to do about it?" The principal shifted uncomfortably. "We're aware of the incident, Mrs. Jackson, but, you know, boys will be boys. Sometimes these things get blown out of proportion. Elena's voice cut through the room like a blade. "My son came home bruised and bleeding. That video is everywhere. And you're telling me it's nothing. Discipline will be handled," he said vaguely, avoiding her gaze. "But you need to understand, Jason's family is very involved in this community. We can't." Alina stood so abruptly that her chair scraped across the floor. Her voice trembled, not with fear but with fury. "You listen to me," she said. "If you can't protect my children, then I will. And when I do, you'll wish you had done your job." She left before he could answer. Her fists clenched at her sides. At home, the emotional wounds ran deeper than the bruises. Ava overheard Marcus one night as he sat in the dark, whispering to himself. "I wish Dad was here," he said softly. "He wouldn't let this happen." Ava's small voice broke the silence. "Mom's trying." "I know," Marcus replied, his voice cracking, "but she's not him." Alina stood frozen in the hallway, listening. The words sliced through her like a knife. She had fought so hard to be both mother and father, but in her son's eyes, she was still not enough. Later, Ava crawled into Elena's bed, her small hands trembling. "I'm scared, Mommy," she whispered. "What if they come here?" Alina kissed her forehead, hiding the storm in her chest. "I won't let anyone hurt you," she promised. But deep down, she knew the promise would be tested. The escalation came quickly. One night, a loud bang shattered the silence. Alina rushed to the front door to find their porch light smashed. The next morning, Ava's bike lay twisted in the yard, the frame bent as if someone had jumped on it. On the driveway, another message was scrawled in spray paint. "Stay out. Freaks don't belong here." Elena's hands trembled as she scrubbed at the paint. Neighbors watched again, whispering but never speaking. The isolation pressed down harder than ever. That night, Alina stood at the window, staring out into the dark street. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, tired, angry, on the edge. Her children deserved better. They deserved safety, dignity, peace, and she was done waiting for the world to hand it to them. In that moment, the Marine within her stirred again, stronger than before. The woman who had survived war zones was not gone. She had only been sleeping. Elena's eyes narrowed as she whispered into the night, "No more." It wasn't just a promise. It was a declaration. The time for passivity was over. The night after the porch was vandalized, Elena barely slept. She sat at the kitchen table, the glow of a single lamp casting long shadows. The house was quiet, but her mind was a battlefield. Her hands rested on the table, scarred from years of service. Hands that had once loaded rifles, patched wounds, and carried brothers through fire. For too long, those hands had been tied by fear of standing out, of making life harder for Marcus and Ava. But now, those same hands itched to act. Elena whispered to herself, a mantra from her Marine days: adapt, overcome, survive. The next morning, Elena woke Marcus early. He blinked at her in confusion when she handed him an old pair of running shoes. "Outside, now," she said firmly. "Mom, it's Saturday," he groaned. "Exactly, we've got work to do." He followed her reluctantly into the crisp morning air. The neighborhood was still asleep, curtains drawn, cars parked in perfect rows. Elena scanned the street, her soldier's instinct never quiet. "Run to the corner and back," she ordered. Marcus frowned. "Why?" "Because you're stronger than you think, and I'm going to prove it to you." He started jogging, awkward at first, but Elena jogged beside him, her pace steady, her breathing controlled. When he faltered, she pushed him. "Don't stop. Not yet. You've got more in you." By the time they made it back, Marcus was panting, sweat on his forehead. He dropped onto the porch steps. "You trying to kill me?" he joked weakly. "No," Elena said. "I'm trying to remind you that you can endure more than you believe. The world wants to break you. I won't let it." For the first time in weeks, Marcus looked at her with something other than shame. He saw determination, maybe even hope. Inside, Ava watched from the window. Later that afternoon, she tugged on Elena's sleeve. "Can I train to?" she asked. Elena knelt to her daughter's level, brushing back her braids. "You don't need to fight, baby. But I want to be brave like Marcus," Ava whispered. "Like you." Elena's heart swelled. She nodded. "Then we'll make you strong too." The days that followed became routine. Mornings were for running, push-ups, sit-ups, and simple drills. Afternoons were for mental exercises, focused games, breathing, control, lessons in standing tall, even when afraid. At first, Marcus complained, rolling his eyes, but slowly, he began to change. His posture straightened, his voice grew firmer. He started looking people in the eye again. Ava turned training into a game. She timed herself doing jumping jacks, skipped rope until her tiny legs shook, and copied every stance Elena demonstrated. And Elena, with every drill, every exercise, she felt her old self rising. The Marine who had once faced down fire and chaos was alive again, sharpened, steadied, unbreakable. One evening, after the kids were asleep, Elena went to the garage. She pulled down a dusty box from the top shelf. Inside lay the remnants of her past, her old uniform, dog tags, and a neatly folded Marine Corps flag. At the bottom was a small, battered duffel bag. She unzipped it and smiled grimly. Inside were tools of survival, not weapons, but equipment: a first aid kit, paracord, a flashlight, a survival knife. She laid them out carefully on the workbench, her mind working like it had in the field. "If they come here again, I'll be ready." The smell of oil and canvas filled her nose, and for a moment, she wasn't a struggling widow in a hostile suburb. She was Sergeant Elena Jackson, Marine, protector, fighter, and she would never be helpless again. The shift in the Jackson household didn't go unnoticed. Marcus walked taller at school. When Jason and his friends tried to corner him, he stared back with a steadiness that unsettled them. He didn't fight. He didn't need to. The change in his eyes said enough. "I'm not your victim anymore." Ava too began to glow with confidence. She no longer shrank behind Elena. When neighbors whispered, she waved back at them, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. Elena's fire spread to them both, a quiet revolution growing inside their small home. But not everyone saw it as positive. One afternoon, while Elena was in the yard training Marcus with boxing pads she'd ordered online, a neighbor walked by. Mrs. Harding, a thin woman with sharp eyes and a tighter smile, stopped at the fence. "What exactly are you doing?" she asked. "Training," Elena said flatly. "Training? For what?" "This isn't the military. You know, people are starting to talk." "Let them. Alina replied, punching her palm with a sharp THWACK. Mrs. Harding sniffed, clearly unsettled. Maybe if you didn't draw so much attention, things wouldn't be so difficult for your kids. Alina turned, her eyes narrowing. Maybe if people taught their children not to be bullies, mine wouldn't need this. Mrs. Harding faltered, then hurried off. Alina watched her go, unshaken. She was done apologizing for existing. That night, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, doing homework while Ava colored beside him. Alina leaned against the counter, watching them with pride. "Mom," Marcus said suddenly, not looking up. "Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me." His voice wavered. "I thought I was weak, but you showed me I'm not." Alina walked over, resting her hand on his shoulder. "You've always been strong, Marcus. You just needed to remember." Ava piped up with a grin. "And I'm strong too." Alina laughed softly, pulling them both close. "Yes, baby, stronger than anyone knows." In that moment, the pain and fear of the past weeks felt lighter. The world outside hadn't changed, but inside their walls, something powerful was growing. Resilience, unity, fire. Later that night, as the kids slept, Alina stood once again at the window. The street outside was still dark, still silent, but she no longer felt like prey. She touched the dog tags around her neck, the cool metal grounding her. "They want to fight," she whispered to the night. "Then they'll see what a Marine can do." Her reflection in the glass was no longer tired and broken. It was sharp, steady, fierce. Alina Jackson, widow, mother, warrior. The Marine had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same again. Alina woke before dawn. The house was still, but her mind raced with a soldier's precision. She poured herself coffee, set her journal on the table, and began to plan. Not a battle of fists and weapons, but of strategy, strength, and heart. Bullies thrive on fear, she reminded herself. So take the fear away. That morning, Marcus and Ava found her in the kitchen sketching diagrams on a piece of paper. Circles, arrows, bullet points. "Mom, what are you doing?" Marcus asked cautiously. "Planning," she said simply. "The Marines taught me that every fight has 3 phases: prepare, counter, and dominate. We've prepared, now it's time to counter." Marcus exchanged a look with his sister, then sat down. "Okay," he said, "what do we do?" For the first time in weeks, Alina saw not fear, but eagerness in his eyes. Her boy was ready. The first counter-strike was subtle. Marcus walked into school wearing his head high, his steps steady. Jason noticed instantly. He sneered across the hallway. "Well, look who thinks he's a tough guy now." Jason mocked loudly. Marcus didn't flinch. He locked eyes with Jason and said, "Not tough, just not scared anymore." The hall fell silent. Jason expected laughter, but none came. The calm in Marcus's tone unsettled everyone, even Jason's friends. Jason shoved him hard. Marcus stumbled but caught himself, refusing to fall. He stood tall, dusted off his shirt, and walked away without a word. For bullies, silence was poison. Jason's grin faltered. Meanwhile, Ava fought her own quiet battles. When kids snickered at her desk, she lifted her chin and smiled instead of crying. When someone called her weirdo, she replied, "Thanks. I'd rather be different than boring." The other children didn't know how to answer. The whispers around the Jackson kids began to shift. No longer just victims, they were becoming something else, something untouchable. At home, Alina upped the training. She set up obstacle courses in the backyard, old tires, ropes, and buckets filled with sand. Marcus crawled, climbed, and sprinted until sweat poured down his face. Ava followed, laughing but determined, her little arms pumping furiously. Every session ended the same way, Alina gathering them close and saying, "Pain is temporary, courage is forever." They repeated it together until it became a vow. But counterattacks weren't just physical. Alina knew bullies needed exposure. So when the school called her in about concerns of aggressive behavior after Marcus's calm standoff, Alina went prepared. She brought a folder, notes of every incident, photos of the vandalism, a copy of the police report she'd quietly filed about the rock through her window. Across the conference table, Jason's mother, Karen Miller, smirked as if the meeting were a waste of her time. "My son's not a bully," she said smoothly. "He's popular. Some kids are just jealous." Alina leaned forward, her eyes cold. "Jealousy doesn't slash bike tires. Jealousy doesn't put my daughter to bed in tears every night. Your son is a predator, and predators stop when someone fights back." Karen flushed, but the principal shifted uncomfortably. Alina pressed harder, her Marine voice filling the room. If this school won't protect my children, I will. And I promise you I'm trained to win battles you can't even imagine. The principal, rattled, promised to look into it. Karen left in a huff, dragging Jason by the arm. But for the first time, Elena felt the balance tilt. The next move came from Jason himself. Cornered and desperate, he tried to escalate. He and his crew waited after school, following Marcus down a side street. You think you're special now, huh? Jason snarled. Marcus's heart pounded, but he remembered his mother's training. He kept his stance wide, shoulders squared. I don't need to be special, he said calmly. Just done with you. Jason lunged forward. Before fists could fly, a car pulled up. Elena stepped out. Her presence alone was like a blade cutting through the tension. She crossed the street, her boots hitting the pavement in steady, deliberate rhythm. Jason froze. For the first time, fear flickered across his face. Elena didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She stopped a foot away from him, her eyes locked on his. Touch my son, she said softly, dangerously, and you'll learn the difference between playing tough and facing someone who really is. Jason swallowed hard. His friends shifted nervously. Without another word, he turned and stalked off. His pride bruised deeper than any punch could. Marcus stood there, stunned, relief washing over him. Elena turned to him. You didn't need me, she said quietly. You held your ground. I just made sure they knew who they were dealing with. From that day forward, Elena stopped hiding. She joined the school's PTA, volunteered for community patrol, and spoke up in meetings with sharp authority. People began to see her, not as the quiet widow, but as a force. And word spread fast. Jason's swagger shrank with every passing day. His friends whispered about how crazy Marcus's mom was, that she was some kind of soldier who could break bones without blinking. Rumors spun wild, but Elena didn't care. Fear was shifting, and now it belonged to the bullies. At home, Marcus and Ava flourished. Marcus started helping younger kids who were bullied, stepping between them and trouble without hesitation. Ava joined a local art club and proudly showed her drawings, no longer afraid of laughter. Their home, once filled with tears, now rang with laughter and determination. One night Marcus asked quietly, Mom, do you think Dad would be proud of us? Elena hugged him tight. I know he would, because I am, and I see him in both of you, every day. But Elena knew the fight wasn't over. Bullies rarely surrender without one last desperate strike. She stood in the garage one evening, tying back her hair, staring at the gear she'd laid out weeks ago. The counterattack was working, the tide was turning, but the war wasn't finished. And when Jason and his mother made their final move, Elena would be ready to dominate. The night was heavy with silence. The neighborhood, usually buzzing with weekend noise, seemed to hold its breath. Elena sat at the kitchen table, her back straight, eyes fixed on the front window. She knew it was coming. The calm before the storm was always the most dangerous part. Marcus and Ava were upstairs, pretending to sleep but listening for every sound. They trusted her, but fear still clung to them like shadows. Elena understood. Fear never truly vanished. You just learned to carry it, and tonight, she would carry it for them. It began just after midnight. The sound of footsteps on gravel, whispering, the faint metallic rattle of a crowbar. Elena rose, her movements deliberate and precise. She clicked off the lights, leaving the house in darkness, and slipped silently into position near the living room. Her heart beat steady, not frantic. She had trained for nights like this. A window creaked, then shattered. Jason and his crew climbed in, laughter muffled behind masks they thought would make them brave. Their phones were out, ready to film. The plan was clear. Humiliate the Jackson family one last time, and broadcast it for the world. They had no idea they'd just stepped onto a battlefield. The first boy through the window landed on a rug that slid out from under him. Elena had soaked it in oil earlier, placing it perfectly. He crashed into a chair with a yelp. His phone clattered to the ground. Screen cracked. Shut up, Jason hissed. Don't mess this up. But the darkness pressed in. Every corner felt alive. A sound echoed from the hallway, a slow, deliberate tap of boots against the hardwood. Jason stiffened. Who's there? Elena stepped forward, just enough for the moonlight to catch her silhouette. You wanted a show, she said coldly. You've got one. The boys froze. Something in her voice, calm, commanding, dangerous, cut through their bravado like a blade. They rushed her anyway, fueled by panic more than courage. The first swung wildly. Elena sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. He dropped to the floor with a cry, immobilized. Another, lunged, caught his momentum, shoved him into the wall. and pinned him with a single arm across his chest. Her movements were clean, efficient, practiced. She didn't strike to injure, just to control. The house became her battlefield. Every piece of furniture, every shadow, an ally. Marcus and Ava peeked from the stairs, eyes wide. For the first time, they weren't afraid. They were in awe. Finally, Jason stood alone, his mask pulled back, his phone shaking in his hand. His friends were groaning on the floor, tied with zip ties Alina had pulled from her pocket like a magician's trick. "Put it down," she ordered. Jason swallowed hard, but his pride fought against his fear. He lifted the phone higher, as if the lens could protect him. "Don't you get it?" he spat. "Everyone's gonna see this. Everyone's gonna know you're crazy." Elena took a slow step forward, her voice like thunder held in check. "No, Jason. Everyone's going to see the truth, that you're a coward who hides behind screens and gangs because you can't stand alone." Jason's face twisted. His hand shook. For a moment, Alina thought he might actually cry. Then came the slam of a door. Karen Miller stormed into the house, fury in every step. She didn't even pause at the sight of her son's friends restrained on the floor. "What the hell is going on here?" she demanded. "Mom, she attacked us," Jason shouted, desperate now. "She's insane." Karen's eyes burned as she rounded on Elena. "How dare you lay a hand on my child? You think you're tough. You think you're better than us." Elena didn't flinch. She met Karen's rage with calm steel. "I didn't touch your son," Elena said firmly. "He broke into my home with his gang, armed. I stopped them from terrorizing my children." Karen scoffed. "Terrorizing? Boys will be boys. This is normal. You're just too strict, too uptight. Too what?" Elena's voice rose for the first time, sharp and fierce. "Too disciplined, too protective, too unwilling to let my children be broken while you excuse cruelty as play." The room vibrated with the weight of her words. Karen faltered but recovered, her voice shrill. "You're a widow playing soldier. You think your little Marine act makes you better than us." Elena stepped forward, her presence filling the room. "I don't think I'm better," she said quietly, with a deadly edge. "I know I've bled for this country. I've carried brothers and sisters home in body bags. I've fought real enemies, and now I fight every day to give my kids a life worth living. While you," she pointed at Karen with piercing clarity, "you've raised a bully who thinks pain is a game." Silence crashed over the room. Even Jason stopped breathing. Karen's face flushed red, but her voice cracked under Elena's calm authority. You can't talk to me like that." "I just did." Elena's words were final, unshakable. Then she turned to Jason, her gaze pinning him in place. "You think strength is making others small. Real strength is carrying others when they can't stand. Real courage is standing alone when no one claps for you. One day you'll understand the tour. You'll destroy yourself before you do." Jason's phone slipped from his hand. His shoulders sagged. For the first time, he looked not like a bully, but like a boy lost, shaken, exposed. Karen rushed to him, grabbing his arm. "We're leaving." "This isn't over." Elena stepped aside, her eyes never leaving theirs. "It is over," she said, "because from this night forward, you'll never come near my children again." Her tone carried no threat, only certainty, and Karen knew it. Without another word, she dragged Jason out of the house. His friends stumbled after her, shame clinging to them like chains. The door shut. Silence settled once more. Elena stood still for a long moment, then finally turned to her children. Marcus and Ava ran into her arms. "You were amazing," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. Elena held them tight, her voice breaking just slightly. "I wasn't amazing. I was just your mom, and that will always be enough." That night, the Jackson home felt different, stronger, safer. The storm had passed, and though Elena knew there would be ripples, meetings, rumors, gossip, the battle had been won where it mattered most. In the hearts of her children, the morning after felt brighter than it had in months. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, warming the Jackson home. For once, no one woke up with dread. No broken glass outside, no cruel notes taped to the door, just silence, peaceful silence. Elena brewed coffee, while Marcus and Ava ate breakfast. Their laughter filled the kitchen, a sound she hadn't realized she'd missed until now. At school, whispers followed the Jackson kids, but not in the old way. Students watched Marcus with a new kind of respect. No longer the boy to mock, he was the boy who stood tall, the boy who wouldn't break. When a younger student dropped his books, Marcus bent down to help, and kids noticed. A new story was spreading, one of quiet strength. Ava blossomed, to no more tears hidden under her pillow. She carried her art book proudly, sketching during recess without fear. Some classmates gathered around, admiring her drawings. For the first time, she smiled without hesitation. The bullies kept their distance. Jason and his friends walked with lowered heads, no longer the kings of the hallway. Rumors swirled about the night at the Jackson house, about the scary Marine mom who had broken their power without throwing a single punch. Fear and respect mingled in those whispers, but Alina didn't care. What mattered was her children were safe. Weeks later, at a community meeting, Elena stood quietly at the back as the principal addressed bullying in the district. Parents debated, teachers promised change, and for once, eyes turned toward her not in pity, but in gratitude. Karen Miller sat 2 rows away, stiff and silent, avoiding Elena's gaze. Jason slumped beside her, no longer the loud, sneering boy he once was. There was no triumph in Elena's heart, only a solemn hope that maybe, just maybe, this family would change too. That evening, the Jacksons walked home together. The autumn wind rustled the trees, but their steps were steady, their bond unshaken. Marcus carried Ava's backpack for her. Ava skipped ahead, twirling in the fading sunlight. Alina slowed her pace, watching them, her heart swelling. She hadn't wanted to wake the Marine in her again. She hadn't wanted to fight, but love had demanded I tend. Through that love, she'd given her children more than protection. She'd given them pride, resilience, and hope. At the corner, Ava turned back, calling, "Come on, Mom." Alina smiled, falling into step with her children. Whatever battles lay ahead, they would face them together, and together, they would always win.